Hello Math140 students, this is your instructor Cindy Enrique, and we are going to continue chapter 10 with section 10.3. We are solving equations that are quadratic in form. So we can solve these method quadratic equations by using a substitution method. So really, there's a workaround solving this equation. I have the square root of x plus x is equal to 6. This is very difficult to solve because I have a square root x embedded in this problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to manipulate it by using a substitution. But the first thing I want to do is write it in standard form. So rewrite in standard form. And remember, standard form means from biggest degree to smallest degree. And just in case you have forgotten, the square root of x is the same as x to the 1/2. So I'm going to rewrite this equation. So I have the square root of x plus x is equal to 6. So now I'm going to rewrite it in standard form. So if I want, I can see it as that square root of x is x to the 1/2 plus x to the 1 is equal to 6. So that means if I'm going to rewrite it in standard form, I'm going to have x to the 1 plus x to the 1/2 is equal to 6. So x plus x to the 1/2 minus 6 is equal to 0. So now this equation is written in standard form. So now that I have this in standard form, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that substitution. So usually what we want to do is use the middle term as the substitution. So we are going to let u equal to the middle term, which is x to the 1/2. So if I were to square that, and let's think about this for just a second. If I have x to the 1/2, and if I were to square it, that would give me x to the 1/2 times 2 over 1. So that would give me that this is equal to x to the 2 over 2, which is just x. So now I have that x, that u squared is really just equal to x. So when I rewrite this, that x that I see there, so this is where I'm going to do a substitution. So I'm going to have the x as a u squared plus, and I have that u as really, or that x to the 1/2 as really a u, and I still have minus 6 is equal to 0. So I've just manipulated this equation to have a u substitution. Now it's easier for me to factor, because if I was going to factor, my a times my c would be a negative 6, and I have a positive 1 as my b value. So I would have this as a positive 3 and a negative 2. So when I factor this, I would have a u plus 3 and a u minus 2 is equal to 0. So that u plus 3 is equal to 0. So that u is equal to a negative 3. I also have u minus 2 is equal to 0. So u is equal to a positive 2. So since I have that u is equal to a negative 3, now what I have to do is a back substitution. When I do my back substitution, remember that u really equaled that x to the 1/2. So if I want to get the x by itself, that 1/2, if I were to square it, it gets rid of it. So now I have that x is equal to negative 3 times negative 3, which is a positive 9. And for the other one, I had that u was equal to a positive 2. And remember, the real value of u was really x to the 1/2. And that was equal to 2. So to undo that 1/2, I got to square it on both sides. So I'm going to get that x is equal to a positive 4. And before I actually box them, I really have to check solution in original equation. So let's go ahead and do that. So I have the square root of 9 plus 9. So here I have the square root of 9 plus 9. Does that equal to 6? Well, this is 3 plus 9, which is not equal. So that does not work. So let's try the next one. Let's try 4. So for this one, I'm going to have the square root of 4 plus 4. Does that equal to 6? So let's see. The square root of 4 plus 4. And it does equal to 6. So here, my only possible answer is x is equal to 4. When I tried checking that x is equal to 9, it did not work in my original equation. Okay? So let's try that again with example number 2. So here it's already in standard form, so that's great. So already in standard form, meaning it already goes from biggest degree to smallest degree, so that's perfect. So that means the middle term, which is that x plus 2, is going to be that u substitution, okay? So let u equal to x plus 2. So that tells me that u squared would just be the x plus 2 squared. So when I rewrite this, I'm going to have a u squared minus 2u minus 8 is equal to 0. From here, what I want to do is factor. So if I have 8, that's going to be 4 and 2, be a negative 4 and a positive 2, and that works out. So then u minus 4 is equal to 0. So I have that u is equal to a positive 4. I also have that u plus 2 is equal to 0, so that u is equal to a negative 2. And remember, from here, that just gives me my values. So I'm going to do a back substitution. And remember, I had that u was equal to x plus 2. So when I have that u is equal to 4, that's really saying that that u is my x plus 2 equal to 4. So if I subtract 2 from both sides, 4 minus 2 is equal to 2. Now, if I have that u is equal to negative 2, when I do my back substitution, that's going to be the x plus 2 is equal to negative 2. So if I subtract 2 from both sides, negative 2 minus 2, that gives me a negative 4. And of course, I want to plug this back into my original equation. So check in original equation. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to have parentheses 2 plus 2 squared minus 2, 2 plus 2 minus 8. When I plug that into, or actually, I think I can actually show that on my calculator. Give me a second. So I wanted to show you that I'm going to be checking that answer for x is equal to 2 into my equation. So I have my calculator up, so hopefully I can do this while showing you the screen. So remember, I'm trying to plug in 2 to see if that's going to work. So I have my parentheses, 2 plus 2 parentheses squared minus 2 parentheses 2 plus 2 minus 8. And that is what I'm plugging in for x is equal to 2. And let's see if that's going to equal 0. It does equal to 0. So that tells me that this answer is a good answer. So now I'm going to try it again for x is equal to -4. Let's see if that works for x is equal to -4. So here I go. I have my parentheses, -4 plus 2 squared minus 2 parentheses, -4 plus 2 minus 8. So I plug it all into my calculator, and I do get that it's equal to 0. So here I get my two answers. I have that x is equal to a +2 and x is equal to a -4. So I checked it in my original equation using my calculator. Okay. So now for example number 3, it's the same process. I have weird exponents, but I'm just going to manipulate them so it's easier for me. So it's in standard form. I have it from biggest degree to smallest degree. Ooh, except that it's not equal to 0. So make sure that it's always set equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. So I'm going to have p to the 2/3 minus 2p to the 1/3 minus 8 is equal to 0. Okay, and remember, we usually want that third term here to be that u substitution. So I'm going to have that u is equal to p to the 1/3. So what would u squared be? And if you're having trouble with that, that's okay. You can do it over to this side. So if I have p to the 1/3, and if I were to square that, then I would have that p to the 1/3 times 2 over 1. And so I end up getting that this is equal p to the 2/3. So when I square that p to the 1/3, I get my p to the 2/3. Okay, so now I can do my substitution. So now I have p to the 2/3, but we said that was really a u squared, minus 2, and that p to the 1/3, we said that that's really u. And I have minus 8 is equal to 0. So this looks very familiar. I think our last problem was just like this. So I know it's going to be 4 and 2, as long as my 4 is negative and my 2 is positive. So I'll have that u minus 4 is equal to 0, so that u is equal to a +4. I will have that u plus 2 is equal to 0, so that u is equal to a -2. So if I do my back substitution, remember that that u value was equal to p to the 1/3. And that's equal to a 4. So if I want to get rid of that 1/3, I'm going to multiply it to the 3rd power. So now I'm going to have that p is equal to 4 to the 3rd power. And 4 to the 3rd power is 64. Now I'm going to do that again with my u is equal to -2. So that u value is p to the 1/3, and it's equal to a -2. So I'm going to go ahead and raise each power to the 3rd power. So I'm going to have parentheses -2 to the 3rd power, and that's going to give me -8. And of course, I'm going to plug this into my calculator again. So here is my calculator. Move it over a little bit. Okay, so here we go. I am going to plug it into my original equation. So I have my p, let's try 64 first. So I have 64, and it's going to be to the power here. And I can always put in my fraction, and I have 2/3. And I have minus 2 parentheses, and I still have my 64. And I'm going to have to my power of, and there's my other fraction. So that fraction is going to be a 1/3. And I'm going to subtract 8. Does that equal to 0? It does. So P equal to 64 is a legit answer. I have checked it in my original. So now I'm going to do the exact same thing using now my next answer. So here I have P is equal to a -8. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this and try it for -8. So I'm going to have a -8 to the power of, oops, so -8 to the power of 2/3 -2, and I have my -8 to the power of, now I have 1/3 -8. Does that equal to 0? It does. Perfect. So both of those answers were good answers. So P is equal to 64 and P is equal to -8. Awesome. And now we have our third example. So here we already have it in standard form. Perfect. So you know we're going to have our middle term equal to that u value. So I'm going to have u is equal to the square root of x. So then u squared, and if you need to see it over here, over to the side, the square root of x, if I were to square it, what that tells me is if I have x to the 1/2, it's being multiplied by 2. So I have x to the 1/2 times 2 over 1, which just tells me that this is just x to the 2 over 2, which is just x to the 1, or better yet, just x. So when I have u squared, it's going to be x. So now I get to plug that back in. So I'm going to have my u and my x value here. My x value is really a u squared minus the square root of x is really u, and I have -12 is equal to 0. So hopefully you guys are becoming pros at factoring now. If I have 12, I'm looking at 3 and 4, with 4 being negative and 3 being positive. So that u plus 3 is equal to 0, so that u is equal to a -3. I also have u minus 4 is equal to 0, so that u is equal to a +4. So now with that back substitution, really that u value is the square root of x equal to a -3. So I am going to square it. Now I'm going to get that x is equal to a -3 squared, so x is equal to a +9. And I am going to check it, but I want to solve for the other value as well. So that u value, I have my square root of x, and it's equal to a +4. So now I'm going to square it, so I can get that x is equal to a 4 squared, so x is equal to a +16. So now I'm going to plug it into my equation again. So I'm going to try the x is equal to 9 first. So I have 9 minus the square root of 9. Oops, I put 99. One too many 9s. And I have -12. Does that equal to 0? See how that 9 minus the square root of 9 minus 12 is equal to -6? It's supposed to equal to 0, and it doesn't. So that tells me when I checked my solution, it doesn't work. So now let's see what happens when I plug it in for the positive 16. So that's the other one I'm going to try it in for. So maybe if I scroll this over, I can see it a little bit better. Okay, that's a little bit better. Now I can see everything. So let's see if I have any more luck. So 16 minus the square root of 16 minus 12. It should equal to 0. Let's see what we get. It does equal to 0. Perfect. So we get only one possible answer. The only possible answer is that x is equal to a positive 16. Okay, so that's for example number 4. The rest here are practice problems. So this is where you guys are going to press pause on your device, whether it's your cell phone or your iPad or your computer, and you're going to try to work these problems out by yourself and see what you get to, okay? So press pause. Well, I hope you guys worked out the answers just like I did. So if you want to check your solutions, here they are. So for the number 1, I got 4 possible answers. I got positive 1, negative 1, 2, and negative 2. When I plug in those values one at a time into my original equation, each time I get 0. So those 4 distinct solutions are my 4 distinct answers to this problem. For number 2, I got 2 possible answers, but now when I plugged in positive 1, it didn't work. So the only possible answer here is z is equal to 4. For number 3, I had to find my LCD, and I had to use some of my strategies that I had used in the prior sections, which was fine. And then it didn't factor, so I had to use the quadratic formula. So I actually ended up getting a negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 45 over 2. And believe it or not, I actually plugged that into my calculator and it worked out. And that is the end of this section. Feel free to email me if you guys have any questions. Thank you.